Hey everyone, this is Kevin from thechesswebsite.com, and today we're in the final round 13 of the 2016 Tata Steel Tournament. Magnus Carlsen's been leading this tournament from the beginning, so I thought what better way than to end it with Magnus Carlsen. But we have a pretty interesting story on our hands. Magnus Carlsen is up a point on his opponent today. Playing the black pieces is Liren from China. He's a point behind Magnus Carlsen. What this means is, even though he's in third place, if he were to win this, he would be tied with Magnus Carlsen. Now, Fabiano is in second place, half a point behind Magnus Carlsen. So if he were to win, Magnus Carlsen loses. Fabiano's the champion. If Magnus Carlsen loses and Fabiano ties, we have a three-way tie. So a lot riding on this match. Now, Magnus Carlsen does just need a tie here to claim the victory, but he likes to play for the win in anything he's playing, so definitely going to be a pretty exciting match today. If you're not too familiar with his opponent, Liren from China, he's 23 years old. He got second in this tournament last year, only a half a point behind Magnus Carlsen, so extremely talented player. This 23-year-old has the highest rating, highest rank ever for a Chinese player in the world. He's currently ranked 12th in the world, but all in all, a fantastic Chinese grandmaster. So we'll go ahead and get into it. Pretty epic match today. Magnus Carlsen starting out with pawn e4. Gotta love Magnus Carlsen playing the aggressive openings so many times. Pawn e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop here to b5, getting into the right Lopez. We do see the Morphy defense, pawn to a6. We've kind of seen that Birdland defense for a while, but Morphy defense has kind of been the way that Black's defended this in this tournament. Bishop back here to a4, and then knight f6, castle on the king side. So kind of going more for that open line where we see the knight come down here, capture on a4, and then pawn here to d4. Then pawn b5, and then bishop back here to b3. The main line continues with black, pawn to d5. Pawn takes here on e5, bishop to e6, just solidifying this pawn here on d5, and then knight to d2. And white has a few options here. Usually kind of the classical lines would be pawn here to c3, or even bishop here to e3, just develop moves. Both of those are fine. Karpov used to play this knight here to d2 back in the 78 World Championships, played it to great success from here. Exactly what Magnus Carlsen played. We see knight here to c5, a pawn here to c3. And in those 78 championships, kind of the popular move was pawn here to d4. Probably not as strong as what Ding played, which was bishop here to e7. This is kind of the more popular move nowadays. So this is the line that they took in the game. Now the bishop comes back here to c2, and then pawn to d4. So we see black putting a lot of pressure, starting to push forward in the center of the board. Now knight here to b3, and Magnus Carlsen has a few options. If he wanted to, he could take here, pawn takes here on d4, the knight could take, knight recaptures, queen takes, knight to f3. We could see an exchange with the queens on board, but the queen could continue to be aggressive if he wanted to. Queen here to b4, pawn a3, queen here to c4. This is going to be completely fine, but Magnus Carlsen decides to go ahead and play knight here to b3. And then we see continue push forward with pawn here to d3. And could also take, if he wanted to take here on c3, could take. We could see the knight capture, bishop capture, the pawn take. This is going to be fine as well. So many variations. They could go down, but both of these players not spending too much time. Really feels like they've prepared for this, and so they like these variations that they're going down. So after pawn here to d3, we do see the knight capture here on c5, and then the pawn take. So black has a double bishop pair, but not for too long. The knight's going to come here to e6, gobble that up, and then we see bishop here to e3. So white has completed his development. He's gotten all his pieces involved into the game, connected his rooks, and then all kind of black has to do is castle on the king side if he wants to. Doesn't have to. He could just continue to develop his king into the game. Once the queens come off the board, you really just kind of want your king to get involved into the center of the board. Really a powerful piece. So we may not even see that castle on the king side. First, we do see rook here to d5 attacking this pawn. So both sides have 7 pawns on the board. So it just kind of depends on what Magnus Carlsen wants to do. He could try to hold on to this pawn if he wants to, or he could just attack this pawn right here. He decides to go and attack the pawn. So rook here to c1. Now the knight's going to take. Knight recaptures here on e5. Rook to e5. Bishop here to e5. forcing the rook to move. Also attacking the pawn here on g7. Dean kind of has two options. He could try to hold on to this pawn. It's going to be futile, though. There's no way for him to really hold on to it. Rook here to e2. King here to f1. All of a sudden, rook here to d1, bishop here to e3. There's kind of stopping. This pawn is going to fall. The rook's just going to come back here. So he kind of looks at it and decides, okay, that's not going to do too much. So I'm going to just swing my rook over here to g5, protecting this pawn. I know I'm going to give up this pawn here on c2. I don't want to give up any more material. So Magnus Carlsen now decides to go ahead and take rook here on c2, and then king to f7. So even compared to that earlier variation where Magnus Carlsen started to have a little bit more tempo, getting his king involved with king here to f1, this saves black just even that one little move, which is always nice. His king is more involved in the game than Magnus Carlsen with his king here on g1. Magnus responds with bishop here to e3, just attacking the rook. Rook swings here to e5, pawn to c4, trying to break up the queen side. Pawn b4, now rook over here to d1, controlling this long center file. We do see an exchange on board, and now king over here to f1, getting it involved into the game. And if you kind of look at it, it's going to be tough for any side to really have a strong end game right here. They both have equal amount of material, so the game is definitely equal on board. It's going to be someone's going to have to make a mistake for this game to end in a win, which bodes well for Magnus Carlsen. But bishop down here to g5. What's really nice about Magnus Carlsen is he could just easily take right here. He could take here on g5, just continue to force down the material to just the kings on board. He could get an easy draw, take home the victory money with the trophy. All in all, it'd be a great tournament for him. But he decides, hey, this is the last round. A lot of people come to these tournaments to see the world champion, and he wants to win every match, even if he's kind of already got it in the bag. So he doesn't take right away. Decides to go and play bishop here to d4, continue to attack his opponent. Rook over here to a5, pawn here to b3. Kind of really the only way to stop this attack on a2. Solidifies his pawn chain and then opens up for his rook here on c2 to stop that attack. Bishop here to f6. A bishop down here to e3, still does not want to give up that bishop. Bishop here to g5, now pawn up here to f4, says, okay, let's start to just push forward, see if we can get some attack, see if we can put black in a tough position here. And so bishop back here to e7, pawn push forward here, g4. So Magnus Carlsen is on the attack on the king side. Pawn here to h5, pawn h3, and then pawn g6. Then we see the king get more involved. King here to e2. We do see an exchange on the board. Pawn here to e5, just trying to break up the center of the board. King here to f3. Pawn takes, bishop takes. Now bishop here to d6. Now we see the pawn come up here to c5. Kind of interesting. The bishop could take here if he wanted to. This just putting a lot of pressure on his opponent. Decides now to go ahead and take. Now this bishop's going to take here on c7, attacking the rook. Now rook here to b5, king here to e4, king here to e6. So both sides doing a good job of getting their kings involved into the action. Bishop over here to f4, rook here to a5, and then bishop here to d2. Bishop over here to e7, rook up here to c6, attacking the king, and then the rook swings over here to g6. So Magnus Carlsen has a passed pawn on the board, but as you can see, he did have his rook here on c2. That was kind of the last line of defense for this pawn on a2, so he decided, I'm going to go ahead and give up that pawn here on a2 because I want to have a passed pawn here on the g file and start to put pressure on my opponent. Also keep in mind that if you are going to push your pawn to the 8th rank, you always want to look to see if your opponent has a bishop and see what color that's on. So Magnus Carlsen, he can push up here to the 8th rank. His opponent has a dark square bishop. It's not going to be able to defend the square right here. So it kind of puts black in a tough spot where he knows that Magnus Carlsen can just kind of push up the board, really defend this pawn, and eventually get a promotion here with this passed pawn. So he's definitely going to be in a lot of trouble, but right now he needs to go and get that material back. So rook down here to a2, capture that material. Bishop here to f4 since his bishop was being attacked. And then rook here to a3, attacking this pawn here on b3. We see Magnus Carlsen push forward with g5, says, I'm going to give up that pawn. I'm going to allow you to have two passed pawns over here because my passed pawn is a little further up the board. So after here, we see the rook take. Now the rook's going to swing over here to b6. And this is basically saying, okay, I'm not going to allow you to do anything too crazy. You can't get your rook too involved. I'm just going to take this pawn. So it kind of keeps this rook at bay here. It also attacks this pawn here on a6 for anything crazy. And black has a tough decision to make as well. He could play pawn here to a5, maybe start to push forward. He could just completely give up this pawn. So he's up a pawn in material right now and say, okay, this pawn over here is too dangerous. I'm going to get my rook involved into the game, but as soon as I move my rook, I'm going to lose this pawn. But that could be completely fine. Or the other option, which is exactly what he decided to do, is I'm going to give up my bishop because this pawn is so powerful. So he decides, okay, I'm going to go ahead and give up my bishop and then start to push forward with my pawns. Now, he knows that Magnus Carlsen can no longer promote to a queen. So this is the max that Magnus Carlsen is going to be fighting with the whole game. It's still going to be difficult for Magnus Carlsen to get a win with this material. He's going to have to, chip away, take these pawns, eventually still make this rook disappear because you can't actually checkmate your opponent unless they make a mistake with just a king and a rook versus a king, rook, and a bishop. But first we're going to play rook over here to a6, pawn here to a4. So black decides, okay, I'm going to give up one of my pawns right here. My passed pawn is valuable to me, and so I'm going to go ahead and start to push forward with that. Rook here to a3. And Magnus Carlsen, this is another one of those times where he could have just decided that he could take here. After the pawn takes, bishop here to e3, even if we see, the pawn push forward, this is another one of those cases where we have a dark square bishop, the pawn's going to promote to a dark square. Magnus Carlsen can hold on to this square, and it's going to be a drawn game. Magnus Carlsen can't win with just a bishop, but he looks at this and said, you know what, you're offering me a draw in a sense by playing this. I didn't come here to get a draw. I came here to put pressure on my opponent, continue to push forward until the end of the game. So he plays rook here to f5, now pawn to b3. So, hey, black says, okay, if you're going to do that, I'm just going to push my pawn as much as possible. And now he's pushing towards a white square right here, which the dark square bishop's not going to be able to protect. So Magnus Carlsen needs to kind of protect the next best square, which is the square here on b2. Now black plays rook here to a2, just allowing himself some protection if he were to play pawn here to b2, and then bishop here to d4, pawn here to b2, and then the rook's going to swing over here to c5. King here to a b6, and we see a discovered attack. It doesn't really matter where the king moves. If we were to move here to, rook to d6, all of a sudden rook to b5, two attackers defending the square here on b1, also just putting two attackers on the square here on b2 as well. So, we see this king come here to b6, discovered attack, rook here to c3, forcing the king to move. Now the rook swings over here to b3 check. Now the king comes here to c4, rook up here to b8. So still protecting this pawn pushing forward here to b1. The rook can't really move because then the bishop is going to swing down here and just take the pawn. And this king can't really move anywhere. He has this entire kind of blocked off right here, has no moves, no legal moves from this position right here. So he's kind of stuck right now. All you'd really need is just a knight right here. It'd be really nice to go ahead and check. Checkmate, really weird checkmate, but can't move his king right here. So instead decides, okay, I have nothing else going for me. I can't really move my pawn. I can't move my rook because then the pawn leaves. So he decides, okay, I'm just going to give up this pawn right here. And then it's just defense mode for kind of a long time. We are in move 58 right now. It's just kind of he knows that he can't win the game. He knows Magnus Carlsen's the only one that can essentially win the game. So his goal right now is just to tie the game. And this really comes down to Magnus Carlsen really likes to grind down his opponents. He's the best in-game player in the world. He probably has the best endurance, probably one of the more athletic players out there. And so he's fine playing hour-long matches and grinding them down. So this is, I feel like Magnus Carlsen thrives on this type of environment. We see bishop here to e3, rook here to c2. Now the rook swings up. And you see kind of just lots of movement. What black wants to make sure he does is he doesn't have any crazy thing where his king gets too far away from his rook, so there's some check, and then his king has to move and his rook falls. He doesn't want to do any of that. He wants to make sure that he keeps not both his king and his rook on dark squares, because dark square bishop, you could all of a sudden get some sort of fork or some sort of pinning the king down to the rook, capturing the rook. All Magnus Carlsen really needs is this rook here of his own. So if he can exchange off his bishop for the rook, that's going to be fine. So Black doesn't have to worry about too much in the game, but those are some of the high-level things that he's going to be thinking about for the rest of the game. So king here to d5, king d3, rook over here to h7. And then both sides just kind of moving around. You can see Black hanging out on these light squares, which is always nice. So he kind of moves, just protecting his king all over. So many different moves. We're already on move 74. Magnus Carlsen. What's crazy is, though, any mistake that White makes in this game just results in him losing. He has to be so precise in all of his moves that it's just crazy. As we kind of move over here, we can all of a sudden see, king here to g4, bishop down here to f2, king here to h3. Even if we look at this position right here, we did see, Ding, he plays after bishop to f2, king here to h3, but he could easily make a mistake here. After bishop here to f2, we could see rook here to h2. Maybe wants to start to try to get creative, get aggressive, but then all of a sudden, rook here to g8, forcing the king to move. The king can't come to any of these squares because the king can't stay on the g file. Can't come here to h4. That's going to be bad. So let's say he comes here to h5. If he comes here to h3, this is also going to be bad. You can just get the king more involved into the game. You could say, king here to f4. Then the rook's going to move, and then a rook here to h8. That's going to be checkmate. That's going to be extremely bad. But, king here to h5, and all of a sudden a rook here to h8. The rook's going to fall after the king moves. Let's say king here to g6. This is going to be a good game for Magnus Carlsen. So you can see that kind of any of these moves that we look at, if there's just any sort of mistake from Black's side, Magnus Carlsen's going to win the game. But king here to h3, king f3, rook here to g3, king f4, rook g4, king f5, rook g7, bishop here to d4, centralizing, attacking the rook. Rook comes back here. Continue to keep those pieces on the light squares. Is Black doing a really good job of that? Rook here to e2. And you can see Magnus Carlsen's trying everything in his power to find some sort of mistake, but Ding's just not having it. Very skilled player. This is kind of one of those end games where early on, you just kind of learn this, and you know what to expect, and you try not to make any mistakes, and especially at this high level, you just don't see too many. So king here to f3, rook here to f2, and this is sort of a nice fitting into the tournament. Bishop takes here on f2, and this is a stalemate. So the king can't move, but because he's not in check, this is actually a drawn game, and this was the 99th move in the tournament. One of the longest tournament matches that we've seen in a long time, but Magnus Carlsen with the draw ends up winning the tournament. Fabiano Caruana actually lost his match. He was going all out trying to get the win and ended up losing. So we have, Ding actually from China getting tied for second with Fabiano Caruana. So second year in a row, he gets second place, only 23 years old. I expect great things from him in the future. He played a really solid game against Magnus Carlsen. But what can you say? Magnus Carlsen, he's the world champion. He does what he does. He comes to tournaments. He crushes. And I really like the fact that even in the last round, his opponent essentially offered him draw after draw. Magnus Carlsen says, no way. We're playing until the very end. 99 moves. You really can't ask for more from a world champion. It was pretty interesting. They were asking some of the competitors they were playing in the candidates tournament in March, kind of the big tournament to decide who's going to play Magnus Carlsen later in the year for the World Championship. Going to be the biggest tournament. We're going to cover that as well. But they were asking Anish Giri, they were like, who's going to win the candidates tournament? And he said, no one knows. You should find a tournament that Magnus Carlsen's actually going to be playing on and just bet on Magnus Carlsen because he's the best in the world. And he really is. He holds, all the blitz and the rapid chess tournament championships right now. He's the world champion in just normal play. I don't see anyone right now stopping him. I do hope that some of these younger players, that as they're getting stronger, that they eventually can challenge him. But for right now, the world is Magnus Carlsen's. He's too strong, and he wins the second year in a row the Tata Steel tournament. So congratulations to Magnus Carlsen, yet again the champion. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this tournament. Had a lot of really fun games that we've covered. So be looking out for the Candace tournament. That's going to be the next tournament that we are going to cover. That's in early March, and that's going to be a big one. 6 of the top players in the world that they've kind of been qualifying for the past 2 years. So make sure you mark your calendars for that one, and I'll see you guys then. Thanks for watching.